Good morning and welcome back to Margin. This morning we're going to talk about my thoughts on the tidying up movement. So let's jump right into it. The next component comes down to email. Now, email can be a necessary evil. Now, many people, especially in the last year, have moved over to utilizing more interactive platforms like Slack. But at the same time, most people still operate with an email address of some kind and have a hard time trying to organize that. So what Marie typically recommends is that people have archived folders. Now, if you have a ton of emails that have never been archived, you may want to consider having an archived folder first that you create and dump all your emails into, then breaking down the specific folders that you want to have going forward, and every new email that comes in gets categorized accordingly. Now, the purpose here is to make sure that you are designating when you're going to be checking your email, setting email hours, maybe setting up a time that you are going to check your email first thing in the day, and then the last thing you do before the end of the day, or figuring out a system that works for you so that you're not constantly distracted every time an email ends up in your inbox. And so going through that process of being intentional with your email will save you a significant amount of time and will clear headspace so that you can focus on the projects at hand. Now, the other component you may want to consider is unsubscribing from email lists that no longer apply to you. Going through the process of unsubscribing from those daily emails that may not be adding value to you anymore. So I just went through this process. It took quite a while, but I receive a lot less emails on a daily basis because of being intentional about unsubscribing from the coupons or from the daily news feeds and so on and so forth that we can get so easily distracted by. Now, the sixth component is your phone. Now, the first component of that comes down to erasing those apps that you thought may be beneficial at a certain time, but now are just cluttering your screen, are causing you to get distracted throughout the day, and actually, quite possibly costing you money. And so going through the process of looking at those apps that you've either purchased or downloaded, figuring out which ones you can cancel, the subscriptions you can cancel, and then deleting those apps that maybe were free but don't add any value to you. So the seventh component that she goes through is schedule. So schedule looks at reconsidering where your time and energy is going, and really envisioning what your perfect day would look like and whether you would be in certain meetings or not, whether you'd be spending a certain amount of time on specific projects or not, and figuring out what schedule works best for your productivity. And looking at this from a standpoint of what actually feels heavy and what sparks joy. So from her perspective of figuring out, okay, what things are actually beneficial to my specific role and what things are just sideways energy. And looking at that from a standpoint of not automatically saying yes to everything, not automatically opting in to being a part of a project, part of a team, or being included in a meeting, but figuring out how to respectfully ask the questions that need to be asked to make sure that you're involved in the things that actually are important for your role. So she goes into the whole scheduling component of figuring out, are there aspects that you're involved in that someone may be better suited doing, that someone may be a better decision maker on, and actually going through the process of a level of intentionality around figuring out what needs to be done and what possibly doesn't need to be done at all. So the eighth component looks at meetings. Now, meetings can be the bane of our existence, but actually sitting down and looking at your meeting schedule of those that you've planned yourself, those that you've been invited to, and figuring out what meetings are actually beneficial, figuring out whether it's required, whether it is a part of your ideal life, and figuring out what meetings can actually be canceled or combined, what meetings you can send a pre-prescribed agenda for, in order to make sure that they're as productive and time sensitive as possible, so that you are not spending copious amounts of time in these meetings that may not be very productive. So the ninth component comes down to teams. Now, reviewing every team that you are a part of, figuring out if that team is still necessary based on the seasonality of the organization and what projects are actually being focused on, is really important, because oftentimes we end up in various teams working on certain projects and we don't actually look at whether they're relevant anymore. So the 10th and final component comes down to environment. Now, environment was more ambiguous in the sense that it encompassed a lot of different aspects, but really looking at whether you actually recognize those that work with you, those that work for you, those that are your colleagues, actually recognizing them for the work that they do, and being actually mindful and intentional about those around you. And so in your environment, that will improve your environment, because you're working with these people every day, and will improve the joy that you have at work. So I understand why that's there. But at the same time, just being mindful about not only the people, but also looking at the environment from things that are controllable from a standpoint of aesthetics. Anything that you can influence or anything that you can change based on your role that may actually inspire joy in other people as well. So the environment also looks at a level of self-reflection, looking at consistently what adds value to you, and being mindful of things that no longer add value, and constantly pivoting. And so beyond that, looking at the people, looking at the environment from an aesthetic standpoint, and really thinking about how you can maximize your network, and actually, work on intentionally being around the right people, making sure that you are saying yes to the right meetings with the right people, spending time with people that you have a meaningful connection with, and making sure that that environment is as healthy as possible. So that covers a lot of different components within environment, but I can understand why it's important in the sense of the people you work with making or breaking certain jobs. So focusing in on your workspace will allow you to expedite decision making, will allow you to make sure that everything that is there has a purpose and has a place, has a meaningful impact on you, and that nothing is just haphazard. So I was originally introduced to Marie Kondo by my sister-in-law, who went through the process of tidying up her home. So she went through that process, and she loved the ability to have a process in place for one in, one out. That was the main thing that she brought up that she loved, because whenever you bring something into your home to replace another item, for you not to just keep that other item around, but to be intentional about actually disposing of, donating, or blessing someone else with that item when you purchase a new item. So it makes you a lot more intentional about maximizing the use of that item, making sure that you are getting the joy out of that item that it should provide for you, and then being able to be responsible with disposing of that. And so going through the process of this should help you in your environment and in your lifestyle with defining and outlining really what matters to you, and further helping you to figure out whether you're at home, whether you're working from home, or whether you're at work, that you are actually intentional about these spaces so that you can be in the best mind space possible, so that you are making decisions that are decisive, and that you are not allowing your space to impact you negatively. So although Marie's approach is very unique in the sense that she typically talks to the space, she talks to the items, and shows her gratitude and appreciation. So there's some aspects to how she operates that may be off-putting to certain people, but I believe that the principles here are still beneficial in figuring out what you can apply. So my call to action today comes down to looking at your home space or your workspace and figuring out how you can take some of Marie's inspiration from a joy standpoint and figuring out what items really do spark that joy in you and what items don't. Figuring out what can be decluttered, what can be removed, and what items are just no longer necessary, and figuring out how to optimize your spaces so that you are in the best headspace possible. If this information is helpful to you, please do like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you're reminded to come back on a daily basis and improve in managing your personal finances. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.